My grandmother handed me a certified check for $5 million on Christmas morning, smiled like she'd been waiting years to do exactly that, and told me not to cry. I didn't. My brother cashed his within 72 hours, threw a party in a rented mansion in Scottsdale that made the local gossip blogs, and called our grandmother, our 81-year-old grandmother, a controlling old woman when she asked if he'd thought about the taxes. My sister bought a Ferrari, in January, in Cleveland. She drove it straight into a snowbank on I-90 and totaled it before the plates arrived. I folded my check in half, put it in the inner pocket of my winter coat, and drove home to my apartment in Lakewood with the radio off and my hands perfectly steady on the wheel. The next morning, at 8:47 a.m., my phone rang. It was a private number. The woman on the line said she was calling from Meridian Private Wealth on East 9th Street, and that Mrs. Eleanor Voss had requested I come in at my earliest convenience. She said today, if possible, the woman added, in the tone of someone who understood that, if possible, was not optional. I thought it was paperwork. I was wrong. What my grandmother had been quietly, methodically building for 5 years would not come out all at once. It came out in layers, the way cold water fills a room. Slow at first, then everywhere, then over your head before you understand you're drowning. But I need to start from the beginning. My name is Claire Voss. I'm 33 years old. I work as a trust and estates paralegal at Hendricks & Moore on Superior Avenue, a detail that will become deeply, uncomfortably relevant. I've worked there for 9 years, starting as a file clerk the summer after my mother's first hospitalization, working my way up through genuine interest in the work and the particular focus that comes from having nothing else to hold on to. I know what a trust document looks like. I know what a spendthrift provision is. I know what it means when an asset is titled in a trust's name instead of an individual's. I knew all of this before that January morning. I just didn't think to apply any of it to my own family. My grandmother, Eleanor Voss, was the kind of woman who kept a guest book at her dinner parties and remembered what every person had ordered 3 years prior. Born in Canton in 1942, married at 22, she spent 40 years helping my grandfather build Voss Industrial Supply from a single warehouse into a regional distribution company with 11 locations. When he died in 2009, she sold the company for $38 million, hired a private wealth manager named Douglas Farr at Meridian, and proceeded to live exactly as she had before. Same brick colonial on Fairmount Boulevard in Cleveland Heights, same Buick in the garage, same grocery runs to the Heinens on Lee Road every Thursday morning. She wore the same winter coat for 12 years. She kept a jar of peppermints on the kitchen counter. She was the most organized, most observant, most quietly exacting person I have ever known. And for most of my life, I thought that was simply who she was. I understand now that all of it was deliberate. The observations, the patience, the waiting. There were 3 of us grandchildren. Nate, 37, who had never held a job longer than 18 months and had filed for bankruptcy at 34 after a series of what he called investment opportunities. Dana, 30, who was bright and charming and constitutionally incapable of finishing anything. 3 unfinished degrees, 2 abandoned businesses, a trail of borrowed money she always intended to repay. And me. I had a job, I paid my rent, I had a savings account and a modest Roth IRA, and I showed up to family Christmas every year with wine and a covered dish, and I did not ask Eleanor for money, not once in 9 years of needing it. The 3 of us were not close. We shared genetics and a grandmother and a specific emotional vocabulary learned at the same kitchen table, a shorthand for presenting well around Eleanor. Beyond that, we were strangers. I have a habit I've had since college. I make 2 cups of coffee every morning, one to drink, one to hold while it goes cold. I don't know where it started. Eleanor noticed it the first time she stayed with me after my mother's hospitalization. I was 24, she had driven 40 minutes to sleep on my couch for a week, and she never mentioned it once. But that Christmas morning, without a word, she filled a second mug and set it on the counter beside mine. I looked at it, and something moved behind my sternum that I didn't have a name for. The Christmas in question was a Thursday. I drove up to Fairmount Boulevard in a light snow and pulled into the driveway behind Nate's leased Navigator and Dana's boyfriend's Jeep. Inside, The house smelled like Douglas fir and the warmth of a home heated correctly for 50 years. Eleanor was in the kitchen in her good Christmas cardigan, dark red, small pearl buttons, making coffee in the old percolator she refused to replace. We did Christmas the way Eleanor always ran it: coffee first, then breakfast, then presents in a specific order she controlled without appearing to control. Then Eleanor went to the sideboard in the dining room and came back with 3 envelopes. She set one in front of each of us. Standard white business envelopes, our names in her handwriting. "Open them," she said, and sat down with her coffee and watched. Nate tore his open immediately. I watched his face go through shock, calculation, and poorly suppressed triumph in the time it took me to pick mine up. "Grandma," he said, "is this certified?" she said. "All 3. Dana made a sound that wasn't quite a word. I held mine in both hands and didn't open it yet. Something about the way Eleanor was watching, not excited, not nervous, just watching, the way she watched everything, made me want to be careful. I opened it slowly. The amount was printed in the bank's neat type. $5 million and 0 cents. Pay to the order of Claire Marie Voss. I read it twice. Then I folded it in half, exactly as I'd fold a document at work, and put it in the inner pocket of my coat. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said. My voice was even. She looked at me for a long moment with an expression I recognized but couldn't then name. Now, I would call it recognition. "You're welcome, sweetheart," she said, and refilled everyone's coffee and moved on as if nothing significant had occurred, which is exactly the kind of thing Eleanor Voss would do. I put the check in my desk drawer when I got home, made tea, sat at my kitchen table and looked out at the parking lot, lit by one orange sodium lamp, and thought about what $5 million actually meant, the number of it, the weight of it, and realized at some point that I'd been sitting there for 2 hours and the tea was long cold, and I still didn't know what to feel. I went to bed. I slept well, which surprised me. The call came at 8:47 the next morning. Meridian Private Wealth was on East 9th Street, 12 floors up in a glass building that looked out over the lake. The lobby had the particular quiet of places where significant amounts of money are managed. Eleanor was already in Douglas Farr's corner office when I arrived, sitting upright in one of 2 chairs, hands folded in her lap, in her good coat. Douglas was in his late 50s, silver-haired, with the careful neutrality of expression common to people who routinely deliver news that can go several ways. "The checks you and your siblings received yesterday represent a portion of a gift your grandmother has been planning for some time," he said, opening a folder. "But the checks are not the complete picture." What he then explained was this. 5 years ago, after conversations with her attorney and her financial planner, Eleanor had established 3 separate trusts, one for each grandchild. The trusts held the bulk of her estate. They were structured differently for each beneficiary, based on what she had observed about each grandchild over the course of her life. Nate's trust had a spendthrift provision and a managed disbursement schedule. He could never access the principal directly. He would receive quarterly income payments for life, provided he maintained a relationship with a pre-approved financial advisor. Dana's trust had similar protections. Mine had none of those restrictions. Mine was fully discretionary, meaning I could access the principal at any time, for any purpose, without oversight. Beyond that, Eleanor had named me as the sole trustee of all 3 trusts, meaning I would manage the assets for Nate and Dana, including approving or denying any requests they made outside their scheduled disbursements. I sat with this for a moment. "How much?" I said carefully. "Is in the trusts." Douglas slid a single-page summary across the desk. The total figure, across all 3 trusts, was $22 million. The $5 million checks were separate. Eleanor's personal funds, already disbursed, already theirs to spend. The trusts were the real inheritance. I had spent 9 years reading trust documents. I understood exactly what Eleanor had constructed. She had given Nate and Dana enough money to feel wealthy, while structuring the actual inheritance so that neither of them could touch the principal without my approval. She had made me the architect of their financial futures. She had done this quietly, legally, and without telling either of them. As far as Nate and Dana knew, the checks were the sum total of Eleanor's generosity. I looked at Eleanor. She was still watching the window. The lake was gray-white in the January light. "When are you planning to tell them?" I asked. "When it becomes relevant," she said. "Which will be sooner than you think." She was right. It was 9 days. I drove home from Meridian in a state that was not quite shock, but was the next thing over. A kind of vertiginous clarity, where everything looks exactly as it always did, but you understand you've been wrong about its meaning. I had spent 33 years understanding myself to be the overlooked one, the efficient one, the one who was neither the problem child nor the charming one, and was therefore not particularly interesting to anyone. I had built a life on that understanding, and Eleanor had been watching, all of it, all of us, and she had seen something different. I sat at my kitchen table with both cups of coffee going cold and the trust summary in front of me, and thought about every quiet question Eleanor had ever asked over years. "How is the work going? What does that case involve? Do you understand all the pieces of it?" And understood for the first time that she had been building something, that there was a test, that I had been passing it without knowing it existed. The call from Nate came on January 3rd. I was at my desk reviewing a codicil when my phone lit up with his name. I let it ring twice. I always let Nate ring twice, a half second of preparation, and then picked up. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. His voice had the particular texture of forced calm, the kind that sits over something hot. "Grandma's attorney called me this morning. He explained something. He said there are trusts. He said the checks weren't the inheritance." "That's right," I said. My voice was even. Outside the window, January in Cleveland, gray and bone cold, the sky the color of old pavement, a light snow starting. "And he said," Nate continued, his forced calm developing cracks, "that you are the trustee." "That's also right." Silence, not the comfortable kind, the kind that fills with what someone is deciding not to say yet. "Claire," he said finally, "how long have you known?" "Since December 27th, I said. 3 days after Christmas. He absorbed this. "She told you before she told us?" "She told me the same day her attorney was going to inform you," I said. "The difference is that she needed to tell me because I have a legal responsibility. She didn't need to tell you until she chose to." "And you passed," Nate said, not quite a question. "Apparently," I said. The silence that followed was longer, with more weight. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, the heat replaced by something flatter and colder. "I want to request an early distribution from the principal," he said. "Some investment opportunities have come up." "Nate," I said, "you filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago. This is different. You're describing what happened to the money you had then." "Claire." His voice went sharp. "This is a specific opportunity, with people I trust, and I need capital." "The trust is for your long-term financial security," I said. "Eleanor set it up with a disbursement schedule because that is what she determined was in your best interest. I'm not going to override that in week 1. The silence that followed was the longest yet. When he spoke, the negotiating tone was gone, and something older had surfaced. "You've been waiting for this," he said. "Your whole life, you've been the overlooked one, the boring one, and now Grandma's handed you a leash on the two of us, and you're going to use it." I held the phone and watched the snow. My fingers were very still. "I'm going to do what the trust document says," I said, "which is what Eleanor asked me to do." "She won't be here forever," he said, low and deliberate. "And the only thing standing between me and that money is your signature." you think about that." He hung up. I set my phone down, finished reviewing the codicil, sent the edits to the partner. Then I sat very still for several minutes with my hands flat on the desk, and I understood, with a calm that surprised me, that the easy part was over. Dana called 4 days later, on a Sunday evening, calculated when defenses are lower. She deployed the childhood nickname immediately. "Claire Bear, are you busy? Can you talk?" I was making dinner, garlic and something simmering, half a glass of wine. For a moment when her name appeared, I thought, maybe this is fine. Maybe Dana is calling to be reasonable. I knew better. "I have a few minutes," I said. "I wanted to reach out personally," she said warmly, "because things got a little chaotic this week and I haven't had a chance to talk to you directly. How are you feeling about all of this?" The warmth in her voice had a structural calculation underneath it that I could hear the way you hear a floor creak under a rug. "I'm managing," I said. "You?" "Still processing," she said with a small, rueful laugh. "It's a lot." I didn't know, did you know, that she'd set all this up? "Not until December 27th, I said. "So we're both in the same boat, kind of," she said. "Not exactly the same boat," I replied. She moved past it smoothly. "I thought it might be worth the two of us talking, without attorneys, just us. Because I have some thoughts about what would make sense, and I think we could figure something out that works for everyone." "What did you have in mind?" I said, turning down the heat on the stove. She took a small breath. "Parker and I are getting serious, really serious, and I found a property in Tremont, a mixed-use building, commercial space on the ground floor, 2 apartments above. It's a real asset, not a venture. A foundation, something to build on." She stopped, waited. "How much is the property?" I asked. $2.4 million, she said. "But there's financing." "Dana," I said. She stopped. "You're asking me to approve a distribution of $2.4 million because you want to buy a building with your boyfriend of 18 months. A beat. "It would be in my name," she said. "It's property. It's not—" "I'm not going to approve this," I said. The warmth drained from her voice at a speed that told me it had always been a choice. "You're going to be like this," she said. "Like what?" "The one who decides," she said. "The one who determines whether the rest of us live like normal people or whether we're on an allowance for the rest of our lives because Eleanor decided to play favorites." I thought about this. There was a grain of recognizable truth in it, and I think she knew it because she let it sit, let it do its work. "What Eleanor built," I said when the pause had run its course, "was based on her knowledge of each of us. I didn't ask for this role. I'm going to do what the documents say because that is what I agreed to when I accepted the appointment. And if we contest it," she said. "The trust documents are ironclad," I said. "Eleanor's estate attorney has 30 years of experience, specifically in trust litigation. If you want to spend the next several years in court challenging something your grandmother built over 5 years with meticulous documentation, that's a choice you can make." She hung up. I turned the heat back up on the stove. I finished cooking dinner. I ate it at the kitchen table with the second cup of coffee going cold beside the first. And I thought about Eleanor, who had anticipated all of this, every call, every angle, every argument, and had built a structure that would hold regardless. The formal move came 6 weeks after Christmas. A letter from Whitmore and Cross, delivered to my apartment and to Hendricks and Moore. Nathan Voss and Dana Voss, through their retained counsel, were formally challenging the validity of the 3 trusts on the grounds of undue influence and potential diminished capacity on the part of Eleanor Voss at the time of establishment. The letter was thorough, professionally drafted, full of the kind of language designed to communicate both seriousness and leverage. My first response was a sensation like cold water poured down the back of my neck. Not panic, but a sudden full-body alertness that arrives before the adrenaline. I called Eleanor. She answered on the second ring. "I got a letter," I said, "from Whitmore and Cross." "Garrett called me this morning," she said. She sounded entirely unsurprised and entirely unruffled. "Were you expecting this?" "I expected the possibility," she said. "Not the speed. I thought they'd wait longer." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were going to do the right thing regardless," she said. "And if I had told you to expect a challenge, you would have spent 6 weeks carrying it. This way, you only carry it when it actually arrives." I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and the cold January light coming through the window, and something moved in my chest that I could not quite identify. Not gratitude, more the complicated sensation of being seen accurately by someone who has known you long enough to understand how you carry things. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Nothing yet," she said. "Garrett will handle the response. Don't engage with Nate or Dana directly." Then, in a quieter tone, "The trusts are valid. There is no diminished capacity argument that will survive scrutiny. I have 2 independent physician evaluations from the year they were established. They know this. Their attorneys know this. This is about leverage, not winning." "Then what do they want?" "They want you to buy peace," she said. "They want distributions large enough that it stops being worth fighting. It will be very important that you don't." I told her I understood. I called Karen Way at Feldman and Associates the next morning. Her office was on Euclid Avenue, a floor that smelled like printer paper and bulk brewed coffee. She was compact and direct, with the quality of attention that good attorneys have, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only document on her desk. I laid out the entire situation. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she studied the trust documents I'd brought and said, "Your grandmother's attorney did very clean work. The capacity documentation is robust. 2 physician evaluations is unusual. Most people don't think to get one, let alone 2. This trust was built to be challenged." She looked up. "What they're hoping is that the threat of litigation will cost you enough emotional energy that you approve distributions to make them go away. It's a reasonable bet when the trustee is a family member, because family members have things at stake beyond money. The question is whether you do." I thought about Nate saying I'd been waiting for this my whole life. I thought about Dana saying, "allowance," with the contempt of someone who does not want to be understood. "My grandmother asked me not to buy peace," I said. "Then you don't," Karen said simply. She slid a legal pad across the desk. "Let's talk about how we respond." The months that followed were not pleasant, and I am not going to dress them up. The lawsuit moved slowly, in the way trust litigation does. Nate retained Whitmore and Cross at a significant retainer, paid from his $5 million. Dana joined as co-plaintiff. Their theory was that I had unduly influenced Eleanor, that my profession, my proximity to estate law, and my close relationship with her had given me the ability to shape the trust documents in my favor. It was well constructed in the sense that it contained a grain of recognizable truth. I was close to Eleanor. I did have professional knowledge. The weakness was that there was no evidence I had done anything, because I hadn't. Eleanor had built all of it herself, in consultation with her own professionals, and the documentation reflected this with a completeness that Karen described, the first time she reviewed the full file, as almost preemptive. Eleanor was deposed in April. I was not in the room. Karen had advised against it. I drove Eleanor to the offices that morning, waited in a coffee shop 2 blocks away for 3 hours and 45 minutes, and drove her home. She came out of the building with Garrett, coat buttoned to the throat. When she got in the car, I asked how it had gone. She was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the thin April light. "They asked me why I made you the trustee," she said. "What did you say?" "The same thing I always say," she replied. "The truth." She didn't tell me what the truth was, and I didn't ask. The deposition transcript arrived 3 weeks later. I read the relevant section twice. The attorney for Whitmore and Cross had asked, "Mrs. Voss, can you describe the basis on which you selected your granddaughter Claire as the sole trustee?" Eleanor's answer, in the clean typography of a court reporter's transcript. "Over many years, I observed how each of my grandchildren behaved when they thought no one was evaluating them. I was always evaluating them. Claire is the only one who behaved exactly the same, whether or not she thought I was watching. That is the only quality I was looking for." I folded the transcript and put it back in the envelope and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The lawsuit was dismissed in August. The judge's dismissal order was 14 pages. Karen summarized it in one sentence. "The claims have no merit, and the documentation is complete." The dismissal came with a fee-shifting provision. Nate and Dana were required to pay a portion of the legal costs incurred by the trust in defending against their claims. The amount was not small. The first quarterly disbursements went out in September, per the trust schedule. Neither of them acknowledged receipt. I noted it in the distribution log and moved on. Eleanor came to my apartment for Thanksgiving. It was the first time in my adult life I had hosted a holiday, and I spent most of a week preparing, not because I thought she would judge me, but because I wanted to do it right. I made the stuffing from her recipe, the one with the specific ratio of cornbread to white bread, and the technique with the celery she'd explained twice before it stuck. When she arrived, she stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around the apartment with her quiet attention, and then she nodded slightly, once, in the way that meant she approved. We ate at my small kitchen table. Outside, it was doing the thing Cleveland does in late November. Sleet coming sideways off the lake, windows fogged at the edges, the world past the glass reduced to soft orange streetlight and movement. Inside it smelled like roasted turkey and cornbread stuffing, and the warmth of a heated room against cold weather. We talked about a book she was reading, and about a personnel change at Hendricks and Moore I'd mentioned months ago that she had apparently filed and remembered. She had always done this, kept the small things. I had spent 33 years believing it was just attentiveness. Sitting across from her in my own kitchen, I understood it differently. The small things were never small to Eleanor. Nothing was. After dinner, I made coffee. 2 cups, as always, set both on the table. Eleanor looked at the second cup, and then she looked at me, and something crossed her face I had not seen before. Not quite a smile, not quite something else, something in the space between them that had a long time behind it. "I know about the 2 cups," she said. "I know," I said. She wrapped both hands around her own mug and looked out the window at the sleet. "Your grandfather had a habit," she said. "He kept a spare key in his coat pocket. Not his house key, not his car key, just an extra key, to nothing specific. He said it made him feel like there was always a door he could open." A pause. I never told him I'd noticed. I held my second cup, already going cool. "Did he know," I said, "what you were building?" She was quiet for a moment. "He knew I would protect the people who deserved protecting," she said. "He trusted me to know who that was." Nate called in December, a few days before Christmas. The tone was different. Not forced calm, not heat underneath. Something quieter. He said the quarterly disbursements had been useful. He'd met with the pre-approved financial advisor in Shaker Heights, a man named Howard, and Howard had recommended things that seemed reasonable. He said he was sorry about the lawsuit. I said I understood why he'd filed it. He said he wasn't sure he did. We talked for 11 minutes, which was 11 minutes longer than any conversation we'd had in years. Dana sent an email in January, on a Tuesday. 1 paragraph, professional in tone. She'd decided not to pursue the Tremont property. She was meeting with a small business development consultant and had an idea she wanted to discuss. Not a distribution request, just a conversation. She used my name without the childhood nickname. I wrote a brief response and sent it. Eleanor mailed me the blue glass bird in February, the one from the top of her tree. The guardian bird, wire tail intact, that had been there every Christmas I could remember. It arrived in a box packed with so much tissue paper, I thought at first the box was empty. There was a note in her handwriting, 3 sentences. The tree needed something new this year. You've been guarding long enough to earn this. Keep it somewhere it can see the light. I set it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, where the morning light comes in level and direct. It was there when I made my coffee. I looked at it for a moment. The blue glass, the wire tail, the light moving through it onto the white enamel of the sink. I picked up one cup and poured the other out. I didn't need it anymore.